Hi and welcome everybody. Apologies that I'm late. Technology, it's a lovely thing. This is when you first find out that your normal browser isn't connected. Animal communication is telepathic communication. All animals and people can communicate. You get a mother, gets her baby into hospital and says, I don't know how I know, but I know there's something wrong with my baby. That's telepathics. Identical twins, one just knowing what's wrong with the other. That's telepathics. We call it deja vu. You're thinking of someone, they phone you. Again, telepathics. All animals also communicate in exactly the same way. We're just not aware of it. For me, I started with a book, surprise, surprise, called Communicating with Animals, by a gentleman called Arthur Myers. Now, he was a Washington Post journalist, so he wasn't actually a communicator, which worked out really well for me because the opening words were, I am a skeptic, and loved that because at the time I was vet nursing, very, very Western orientated, and would not have looked. The next book I read was by Penelope Smith, who was a grandmother of communication. She'd been doing it since the early 70s, but she was also a breatharian, not someone I could connect to in any way, shape, or form. If I'd read her book first, wouldn't have been doing communication. So that was the start of my journey. All people that I've taught now can actually communicate far, far better in a day or two than I did for at least the first 2 years. And I was working at it every single day. I read this book, knew it was what I wanted to do. We're talking pre-internet. So yes, for a lot of you people out there, we did exist before the internet, but it meant I had to write off, and most of the communicators were in America. So then it took 6 weeks for the letters to go by snail mail to America. And then when I was lucky enough someone would respond, another 6 weeks back. So you're looking at about a minimum of 3 to 3.5 months. And one of the communicators in the book, Kate Riley, actually took the time to write back to me. And to this day, I have her letter. So I started from there, worked day in, day out, giving myself the migraines from hell. And it was a good 2.5 years, I think, before I started getting face to face. But once I broke that barrier, it wasn't a problem. Going back originally, and we're going back pre-internet. I used to struggle working from printed paper. It needed to be a photo. Now it can be anything digital on a phone as I'm driving, anything like that. People, how do we start communicating? You start by, and everyone is different, by finding out what works for you is part of it. If you meditate, clear your mind and meditate, then good luck to you. I bow down to you. It's not something I've ever done or can do. Some people find that helps. Other people find like in the cartoons, those little chat bubbles, putting a question in there and mentally throwing it to the animal and then waiting to see what you get back helps. You'll find sometimes that will be instantaneous. For me, I'll often get from people, does he, will she, do they? And I get that straight off. I've got the answer, yes or no, before they've even finished the question. Because thoughts are instantaneous. You can think of something and it's snap, it's there. But if you're trying to put it into words, particularly for something that's really important to you, you're going to take the time to find the words to get your point across in the best way possible. Whereas the thoughts are instantaneous. So that's why I've got a yes or a no, because that's a thought part before the question's actually been asked. So whatever you get instantaneously, that snap, go with it. because it's after that that your rational mind starts to kick in and think, no, I couldn't possibly have got that, blah, 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 blah. And that's where you tie yourself up in knots. So instant. How can I practice? Practicing for me is with animals you don't know, because, excuse me, you're so connected. It's always something that you don't do it with your own animals. It's like the doctor doesn't or shouldn't treat their own kids. You need to be remain detached. Clairvoyants never read for their own family. Same scenario. So work with people's animals. Most people these days are absolutely delighted for them to be a test bunny, but only ask questions that you know the owners can validate. It's no good getting a dog that's come from a shelter 3 months ago. The dog's 5, and you're asking them what happened when it was 2, or the owner is, because you've got no way to validate that. So you need to know that the owners know the answers to the questions. And look, you'll get some odd stuff. Go with it. I had one that I kept being shown red wine. It was seriously, it was the color of deep red wine in the dog's water bowl. And after I got shown for the 4th time, I went ahead and asked the people, and it turns out that one of them had kidney problems. They were 2 old Labradors, lovely dogs. And on really hot days as a treat, you remember that Ribena blackcurrant cordial? They used to put that in the freezer in those ice block trays, and then he'd flip one out and put it in the water. And because it was a dark blue ceramic bowl, it literally turned it the color of wine. And that was what the dog was after, was basically a sugar high, Ribena cordial. So you will get stuff that's strange. Are there times I don't communicate? Absolutely. For example, people tell me a cat's spraying. My first response is always needs to go to the vet to be checked for a urinary tract infection. Over 50% of cats that spray have a UTI. Communication's no substitute for veterinary. You need to know that first and foremost. You need to rule out pain and UTIs before we start communications. If the animal is not theirs, I won't do it. Now, every communicator has their own ethics, but that's me personally, won't do it. I had one that the woman said she wanted me to communicate with her cat. That was fine, happy to do it. And when we were taking the stuff and I was asking for the address, she said, I don't know. And I went, well, what do you mean you don't know where your cat is? Oh, well, it was mine, but it's now living with my husband. Well, so, as part of the divorce settlement, well, sorry, you've given the cat up. You don't know where it lives. I'm not prepared. Otherwise, you'll get, can you talk to the neighbour's dog? Can you talk to this? Or I sold a horse 10 years ago and I want to know how it's doing because I regret selling it. That sort of stuff. So, no. What if the animal asks? Bit of a catch-22, that one. It depends on the owner. It's very rare that an animal will ask. My boundaries are that strong, and I would judge that on an individual case basis, because most of the time the animals are pretty much chugging along as they need to be. It's much more about people's ego kicking in. The importance of, the importance of a good on-off switch. Absolutely. When you're starting out, you can't run 24/7. No one can. People say to me, oh, if you hear about an animal, or if my animal says anything to you, it's not going to. It's that simple. I turn on when you're on the phone. I've taken all the details, the animal's details. We start. I kick in. The moment you've hung up and I've written you up and filed the card, that's it. I do not hear from the animal again. So, boundaries. When you're starting out, one of the best things for the subconscious I have found works for most people is on off like a light switch. You know, remember in the old houses they used to have those super big electric light switches with the round, and then you'd have the switch within, and a lot of them were gold or brass. Mentally have a gold one of those, because gold again sends a big message to the subconscious. When you're about to start communicating, mentally flick that light switch on, and when you've finished, switch it off. No one can run 24/7. That's when you start burning yourself out. You're no help to anybody, and you're certainly not any help to the animals. And yeah, when you burn out, I mean, I do remember one girl that reckoned she could hear, she got to the stage, she said she couldn't walk down a Coles or a Safeway aisle because she could hear the animals screaming. Now, sorry, that's just BS. That's her stuff. But again, she wanted to run 24/7 and save the world. And unfortunately, you can't. And it does get quite tough in this job sometimes. Of, people that bloody well they're lying, and that the animal doesn't need to be euthanized or rehomed or whatever, or its convenience. You can't do anything about that. All you can do is try and at least help them to find the right home, or if they do have to go get euthanized, and that does happen sometimes, make sure the owner stays with them if you can, because they owe that at least to the dog. And yes, I have been guilty of guilt tripping people to make sure that they at least stood by their animals. That's one of my own personal pet peeves from years of being a vet nurse. That's one thing I will not do under any circumstances, is leave one of mine. I don't care how hard it is for you. It's always harder for them. Sorry, I'm just scrolling. What did I do before communication? Yes, I did do vet nursing. And yes, I do think for me, and look, I'm not knocking tarot readers or anyone like that. There are some good animal communicators out there who've started that way, absolutely. However, for me, having the species understanding is such a big thing, because if, for example, and I don't like his methodology, and I'm not ashamed to say it, Cesar Millan. There's a reason that guy's being sued for a whole bunch of things. But Cesar understood energy very, very well. And there was two things in his book that stood out to me. One was an actress that was having trouble with her dog. And he was clever enough to say, right, what about, I want you to think of yourself as you're rolling Cleopatra. Well, of course, she's standing upright, and Cleopatra didn't take any crap. The moment she stood up and meant it, the dog picked up on the energy, worked really well. And that's a big thing. It's like people going, oh, Johnny, don't stick the needle in the knitting needle in the PowerPoint. Those of you that are old enough to remember pre-safety switches will understand where I'm coming from there. Really showing my age here, I know. But if I walk in and say no to an animal, I mean it. My boundaries are very clear. My energetic boundaries are extremely clear, and the animal understands and goes, yeah, righto. Whereas the coochie coo stuff isn't doing the animal a favour. And that's the thing people forget. Nature's very, very effective. It's not pretty. It's not politically correct. And this is where having clear boundaries, it doesn't seem to be these days in, call it canine parenting, which is one of my bugbear terms, but most people understand that. You don't need the yank and spank. But equally, I do think we've gone far too far the other way now. And dogs are being deliberately set up to fail, because there are no consequences for actions until sooner or later the poor dog winds up getting absolutely nailed by something in the park, or kicked by someone who's absolutely frustrated because the owners have set the dog up to fail. And we do see a lot of that. What about horses and riding? Look, no different to dogs doing a role. Some horses love being ridden. Some hate it. Some don't mind, providing they don't have a pain association with being ridden. And I mean, you can get some, I know one horse that hates being ridden, but there's one particular rider that he's more than happy to go with, because they understand each other, and this guy understands him. My own horse loves it. we're just starting out. He'd never been ridden before I got him, and I'm teaching, but he's having an absolute ball because he enjoys the work and he's got a strong work ethic. It's no different to people. Some people have a super strong work ethic. Others would happily, if they won tats, would never work again a day in their life and would just swan around partying. Hey, I'd be very happy to win the tats, don't get me wrong, but I couldn't not do this. Everyone is different. Every animal is different. The only thing I will say about being ridden, one of the biggest associations with that is pain. And it's not usually from the rider per se. Ill-fitting tack, not being warmed up, and physiological problems that aren't picked up early enough. There's still enough of that. Ride them through it, she'll be right, mate, that really shouldn't be there. And if your gut tells you your horse or your dog or your cat or whatever it is isn't right, follow that up. I cannot emphasize that enough. I guess one of my own examples was my thoroughbred Champ. Brilliant horse. He'd been a racehorse. He'd been neglected. I couldn't take him on at the time because I had another horse, couldn't afford to. But this horse had been completely set up to fail with this idiot girl, and she was going to sell him basically to the knackers because she decided she needed to get rid of him within 5 days so she didn't have to pay agistment again. I was having a rant to a friend of mine, Kath, if you're out there, thank you, Kath Kovacic used to be a vet, is now an art historian and an author. Check out her books, they're fabulous. Kath became Champ's fairy godmother because she knew how I felt about thoroughbreds and went, well, if you're saying that about a thoroughbred, there's got to be something really special. How about you do the work, I'll pay the bills, we'll get him a new home. When we moved 4 weeks later to the other agistment because the place had been sold, I found out that the horse I had at the time was blind. She wasn't quiet, she was blind and didn't cope with the move, so had to put her down, kept Champ. Champ was brilliant, wasn't moving very well. He didn't feel right, so I put him on the lunge, had a look at him and went, oh my God, I'm not getting back on until he's starting to move properly. It was about 3 months before I built him up to where I felt he should be, and then went to get on, and he threw me really, really badly. Now, anybody else would have potentially blamed the horse. I knew it wasn't his fault. Every horse is bolting around madly. The wind's blowing a gale. I'm on the ground trying to breathe, very, very winded, quite badly injured actually. Couldn't feel my legs, which was my main concern. And when I could sort of croak out, Champ, come, he walked over and just stood in front of me. And I literally hauled myself up his front leg, grabbed hold of the stirrup to haul myself up completely because I still couldn't feel my legs properly. And that's when he shifted and went, okay, you're sore. Now, had vets out and body workers, a chiro, they couldn't find a whole lot. The vet, who I do respect, this particular vet, he's a good horse vet, and he said to me, nah, you just need a better rider. And I just knew that no, because if the horse was to quote him being an arsehole, he wouldn't have been good when I'd come off. Long story short, that's when I found out all about firsthand the malformations. Equine vertebral complex malformation, C6, C7 malformation, call it what you will. My boy had it. It was all through his line, and the last 2 or 3 weeks of his life, he was deteriorating dramatically. But had in those 2 months that I was trying to find an answer, had I not kept listening to my gut, I would have caused my horse a hell of a lot more pain. And you are your animal's advocate. And 2, probably would have wound up in a wheelchair or something if I got back on through no fault of the horse. So same with dogs. If you don't feel your dog's right and your vet's not picking it up, keep a diary and go to another vet. I always remember many, oh God, we're talking 40 years ago, with the first family dog. One vet said to my mother, I know you know that there's something wrong with this dog. You know your dog. Just because I can't find it at the moment does not mean that there's not something wrong with your dog. So always, always, always follow your gut instinct. And a lot of what we call gut instinct is actually communication. We're simply not aware of the process. I remember at my aunt's place one day, and she's got this little rat dog thing, and the dog shot off out under the table because there was about 20 of us, and I heard from the dog as it was going out the door, too many people. As an echo, literally same intonation, less than half a second later, I heard from one of the local farmers who was there, too many people. So literally he like, too many people, too many people. It was that close. And this guy was basically known as the cow whisperer in his area, and because he got on so well with cows. So that's basically what's happening is he's communicating. Only he thinks he's simply observing because he's not aware. And unfortunately, communication is not the big booming voice in the Monty Python skits. Sadly, would be much easier. But it doesn't mean he's not hearing it. So a lot of that so-called gut instinct is actually your animal communicating with you. You're simply not aware of the process at the time. What about the to go? Yeah, you'll always know. It sounds wrong, I know, but you will know. And you might wake up in the middle of the night and think today's the day when you're getting to that end of life stuff. Don't think that's come from you. It hasn't. It's come from them. But that's the thing. It's so subtle that a lot of the time you think it's not, but it is. Yeah, someone's just written in, and Ali, and said that she thinks of, she looks at the clock and the dog's pacing around, and she suddenly thinks she hasn't taken the dog for a walk. Is that the dog? If that's around about the time you normally go, and all of a sudden she's getting a vision apparently, oh, right, of her gumboots and a leash. Yeah, that's not subtle. Gumboots and a leash, that is your dog going, excuse me, time to go out now. And yes, when you start becoming more and more aware of it, you will see how many times stuff like this actually does happen. So it's not a one-off. It's happening all over the world with all animals and people every day. We're simply not aware of it. Right, last question. What can we do for communication or to communicate? Oh, sorry. Right, for. Yes, it does help if I scroll down a little, doesn't it? For communication. Oh, right. If you bookings. Sorry. Yes, my apologies. I do need to learn to read these as they're scrolling, don't I? Yes, if you choose that you want a communication, all I need you to do is send me a full body shot, recent full body shot of the animal. Also your phone number so I can call you, and please always put in your time zones, because I don't want to do what I did with one poor lady in daylight savings. Thought I'd be efficient and ring her at 9 a.m. Problem was she was in Western Australia, which was 6 a.m. Wasn't. She was very good about it, but ever since then I have been mildly paranoid. So please always put the state you live in Australia, or if you're overseas, that's fine. Just put in the state so that then I can organise time zones and ring you at the correct time to schedule an appointment. That's literally all I need. Questions? Yes, no, you can. You get to ask as many as you want. I don't do it via email. It's always literally a three-way conversation on the phone. But jot yourself down a list of questions, because there's nothing worse than hanging up from me and thinking, I know what I want to ask. It was. So at least that way you get all your questions answered. And if they want, obviously your animals will want to say a lot, and they will. But that way, because let's face it, you're paying for it, you may as well get the most out of it too. All right, I'm going to have to wrap this one up. Thank you for everyone that's been here and joined. This will be becoming semi-regular. I will be doing another one tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for our American audience. So if you know anyone that's not working, I will be on again tomorrow morning, 9:30. Thanks everyone and have a great night. Take care.